Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and now that we know that Mephisto is in the MCU and has been in it for some time according to his appearance in the Ironheart finale, let's break down everyone in the MCU who might have done deals with this devil. This is a jubilant time here at New Rockstars now that our Dark Lord and Savior has revealed himself. To all you naysayers, we can now say, the year is one! So it's important to take stock of all the existing deals and contracts that might be on the books and whose success in the MCU might have been thanks to Mephisto. Hey, happy Independence Day. Statistically, one of those founding fathers might have made a deal with this guy, and I know which parts of the Bill of Rights he added in at the last second. And if the Ironheart series freaked you out over how powerfully AI can tug at our heartstrings, John and I just had a comprehensive discussion about AI in The Danger Room, our audio-only podcast series exclusive to the New Rockstars Underground subscription service. If you are interested in some bonus off-topic shop talk and able to support us this way, please click the link in the description. In the Ironheart finale, we learn about Mephisto's partnership with Parker Robbins via the Hood.
Where the hell have you been?
Oh, I've been a little bit busy. You see, you're not my only client.
The implication of this line is that Mephisto has several active partners throughout the MCU, which could include characters we've already met, characters we can assume by inference, and characters we have yet to meet. Mephisto in this scene indicates at least one of his past clients was William Shakespeare.
Or as you so eloquently put it, you wanted to be stupid, disgusting, greasy rich. You're like a modern-day Shakespeare. He was also a twat.
Now, the conclusion I jumped to in our initial reaction video was that Shakespeare was confirmed in the MCU as someone whose artistic genius and success was due to a deal with the devil, a reference to the beliefs that William Shakespeare might have stolen or commissioned some of his works from other writers at the time, like playwright Christopher Marlowe, who wrote Dr. Faust, one of the earliest English language examples of the Faustian legend. But since then, I've realized that we can also interpret this line as Mephisto just being annoyed that he offered William Shakespeare a deal, but Shakespeare refused to take the deal and was successful without Mephisto's help, and Mephisto has always been pissed off about that. See, happy now, you British viewers, that preserve the ego of your cultural heritage. Meanwhile, we in America embrace the fact that our greatest cultural contribution, arguably rock and roll, came from Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil on Highway 61 and Highway 49 in Mississippi. Ryan Coogler's Sinners is actually a version of this legend, by the way, and Ryan Coogler was also an executive producer on Ironheart, and I'm sure he has some thoughts as to who in history Mephisto might have crossed paths with. Not to say rock and roll came from Mephisto, but rather blues legends like Robert Johnson were given the tools and the resources to apply their own natural talents to get seen and heard. That's why I'm gonna keep cooking with this theory that the MCU is saying that AI is the tool of Mephisto, because it's not mind control or reality warping that are the devil's playthings, but rather a technological tool, an open door that enables a desperate human to take a less burdened path to success. Later in the episode, Mephisto gives Riri Williams a list of conditions for his candidates.
Because I love the exceptional, the driven, the dogged, someone inquisitive and curious, someone who, due to no fault of their own, finds themselves always at the short end of the stick. And that's why I'm here, to help the unseen, the unheard.
Mephisto goes on to say how those conditions have drawn him to not the best people.
Now, sometimes that means I deal with the selfish or the stingy. People who think their brute force makes them better or more useful than the rest of the world. For example, out of the Forbes 100 richest list, I've made a deal with 100 of them, plus 14 kings, 3 popes, and also a Beatle, Ringo.
Oh, everyone shits on Ringo. Even John Lennon, when asked if Ringo Starr was the best drummer in the world, said, "He's not even the best drummer in the Beatles." Mephisto's implication is that the Beatles' original drummer, Pete Best, was replaced with Ringo Starr, which historically really happened, presumably because Best just didn't vibe with the rest of the band, or maybe just didn't have the right haircut. But really, they're saying because Mephisto might have helped Ringo Starr give some whiplash-worthy solo at his audition. We also have to acknowledge that Mephisto might be lying here, but I also think that he would have no reason to lie, and probably has more fun by presenting his victims with his version of the truth. I also speculated who the 3 popes might include in our reaction video, but as for the 14 kings, I think it's important to note that these would have to be kings who are not born into any inherited power or success or wealth, because Mephisto likes candidates who come from humble beginnings. Most kings in history were born into their dynasties. They inherited it from their father dying, but not all of them, because history is also filled with things like revolutions, dethronings, assassinations, treacherous backstabbings, power grabs, perhaps marriage feuds and the like the current ruling family of Great Britain, the Windsors, for example. The father of Elizabeth II, George VI, was not supposed to be king when he was born. His older brother was. But Edward VIII abdicated after he married the American divorcee Wallis Simpson, creating a scandal. So the MCU implication could be that Mephisto opened up Elizabeth II or George VI's political future by introducing Wallis Simpson to Edward VIII, perhaps at a party. Though, if you watch The Crown, and if you believe that loyalist propaganda, I do believe that George VI and his descendants, including Elizabeth II, did not want this responsibility, and they actually hated their brother and uncle for putting them in that position. But Henry VIII of the Tudor dynasty was also not born to be king. He had an older brother who was heir to the throne, but his older brother Arthur died at age 15, leaving a widow, Catherine of Aragon from Spain, whom 10-year-old Henry at the time was too young to consummate a marriage with. Henry VIII eventually became king 7 years later when their father died, and Henry VIII declared his marriage with Catherine of Aragon, the first of many marriages that would lead to the separation of England from the Roman Catholic Church. And you know Mephisto loved taking the Vatican down a few rungs there. History is also filled with unlikely rulers with humble beginnings as peasants who joined rebellions and rose to the top, like Ivalo the Cabbage in Bulgaria in the 14th century, or Zhu Yongzhang in the 14th century China, who overthrew the Yuan dynasty and established the Ming dynasty and restored the Great Wall of China, or Toyotomi Hideyoshi in the 16th century Japan, who ended the Warring States period. Also, by kings, I'm pretty sure Mephisto also considered any ruler, including queens, dictators, emperors, warlords, prime ministers, chancellors, and yes, presidents. Though President Ross was not someone who made a deal with Mephisto, he made a deal with Samuel Stearns. But who in the MCU did make deals with Mephisto? I think we could rule out any character who was born into wealth, power, or privilege. Any Nepo baby. So, Tony Stark was born rich enough to not need Mephisto. T'Challa and Shuri were born into royalty, did not need Mephisto. Thor was born into royalty, didn't need Mephisto. Shang-Chi didn't need Mephisto, and if he did have a deal with Mephisto, he probably wouldn't have worked as a valet. We can also rule out any characters whose life sucked too much that clearly Mephisto didn't help them. Scott Lang was in jail. Bruce Banner was homeless for most of his adult life. Sam Wilson couldn't get a bank loan. No deals with Mephisto there. We can also rule out characters whose moral characters seem at odds with any possible deals with Mephisto. Like Steve Rogers likely would not have been worthy of lifting Mjolnir if his enhancement via the Super Soldier Serum was aided by Mephisto in any way. Kamala Khan's powers came from a destined connection to her great-grandmother from the Nor dimension and a mutant gene. Carol Danvers' powers came from an accidental exposure to Kree cosmic radiation. No deal with the devil. Clint Barton, James Rhodes, there's just not the kind of darkness in their hearts that suggests any kind of deal with Mephisto was made. Like if Clint knew Mephisto, surely Clint would have gotten his family back during the blip. Bob Reynolds' Sentry was a kid who got addicted to fentanyl when he was in middle school. Mephisto clearly didn't help him. And when he joined the Ox group to get the Super Soldier Serum, it clearly didn't make his life better in any way. If somebody stole your phone, you'd know because they'd have your phone and you wouldn't. But data doesn't work like that. Somebody can take your data without you ever realizing they've done it. And by the time you figure it out, that data has already been sold. Delete Me makes it easy to take control of your data because they agree that your data should be yours and yours alone. Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that helps you reduce the risks of identity theft and scams by removing your data from hundreds of data broker sites. It's super easy to use. You take 5 minutes to submit your info to Delete Me. Their experts comb through the internet looking for places your data should not be, and then they remove it and send you a report on what they've done. Delete Me works all year long to remove things like your name, address, email address, phone number, and more from data broker sites, and they're constantly adding new features and updating their removal targets to help you get back control over your personal data. Get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use promo code rockstars at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use code rockstars. Thank you, Delete Me, for sponsoring this video. But I have singled out other wealthy figures in the MCU whose wealth and influence do seem at odds with their incompetence that suggests to me a deal with Mephisto might have been possible. Well, for one, if that was Mephisto as Jake the Goat in She-Hulk, then Mephisto did make a deal with Madison with 2 N's and 1 Y and not where you think. She might just be too drunk to care what she signs. But strong possibilities of Mephisto dealers would include Tony Stark's corporate rivals, Justin Hammer. That guy was a complete moron, but he did have a devilish dancing ability. I think that guy made a deal with Mephisto. Aldrich Killian, also the classic overseen biotech loser who just returns as this handsome CEO of AIM, who also has scarring on his skin and a fiery extremist tech that seemed like something Mephisto would love. Ezekiel Stane's father, Obadiah Stane, an ironmonger in the Stark Industries corporate suite who got their How? In the other video I mentioned Quentin Beck, another classic underseen and undercredited inventor of the BARF holo projection tech. And if my theory that all AI came from Mephisto, Quentin Beck would be a good candidate, especially if Mephisto returns in Spider-Man Brand New Day, because I did talk about how Brand New Day is the era of the comics between One More Day and One Moment in Time that are two big Mephisto stories. Some big MCU players that I did not mention include the Sorcerers, and we gotta start with Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. Now in WandaVision, Mephisto did not appear, and the show creators said that Mephisto was never going to be part of that story, even though in the West Coast Avengers, Billy and Tommy are supposed to be pieces of Mephisto's soul. So let's revisit the unanswered questions. How was Wanda at a young age able to cast that low-level probability hex to keep that Stark warhead from exploding in their home in Sokovia? Also, what is Mephisto's relationship with the Darkhold? While the Darkhold was drafted by Chthon, if we ever learn that Mephisto might have used that book as a tool to enhance the abilities of any sorcerer who made a deal with him, or if there's some fine print in that document that he added to make any usage of that book an implicit contract with him, then Wanda Maximoff, Agatha Harkness, anyone else who has used the Darkhold could have made a deal with Mephisto. Agatha Harkness also was suspected by the other witches like Jennifer Kale for having connections to Mephisto, with her son Nicholas Scratch suspected of being an agent of Mephisto. That kind of reputation suggests that she might have crossed paths with him before, or he's at least a known figure among the community of witches in the MCU. And Agatha all along, witches like Jennifer Kale, Lilia Calderu, Alice Wu Gulliver, and incoming sorcerer Billy Kaplan all seem to live lives humble enough to not be benefiting from Mephisto. Billy's survival from the car accident, of course, was caused by Wanda's hex giving the soul of her son from Westview and putting it in the corpse of this kid. Mephisto, as far as we know, was not part of that process, unless retroactively future Marvel titles say that he was part of that process. But this connection would also suggest that Mephisto is known to the character of Death. I would imagine that they are foes in a sense, because Death's job is to ferry souls to the afterlife in a more peaceful transition. Mephisto's mission is to torture souls as part of his own game, to steal those souls away to hell. Now, it's hard to say whether Doctor Strange might have made a deal with Mephisto, because the 2016 movie showed the Doctor doing the work the old-fashioned way to become a sorcerer. No real shortcuts were taken, but people like Jonathan Pangborn in that movie might have found their way to magic through people like Mephisto. There's also the variants of Doctor Strange from Multiverse of Madness, like the 838 Universe Strange, who had used the Darkhold, or the other Three-Eyed Strange, who did seem to have hearts corrupt enough that might have made deals with Mephisto. But let's talk about Loki. Loki had a royal upbringing as the ward of Odin after defeating Loki's birth father, Laufey. Now, Loki was taught sorcery by his Asgardian witch foster mother, Frigga. I wouldn't put it past Loki to make a deal with Mephisto whenever it suited him, at least the Loki before the Loki series that showed him on a new path. I don't think Mephisto was involved there. But the Phase 2, Phase 3 era Loki, I feel like would arrogantly look down at Mephisto as like a lesser god than he, and Loki would probably be smart enough to see the fine print of any contract Mephisto presented him and not shake that hand. Really, I think what we are looking for in the MCU are powerful characters, but powerful within Earth's society, who love material riches and material powers of this world, whose unlikely success came from some mysterious means, some process that was not shown as part of any on-screen story, and also characters who seem shifty enough and opportunistic enough to sign a deal with the devil to get ahead. I think we need to be looking at people like power broker Sharon Carter, whose rise in the Madripoor underworld was never really shown. Mr. Paradox of the TVA, why is his career advancement so desperate? Bucky Barnes, what led to him becoming a congressman? I think Bucky gets a pass, because he did resign from the position. So other than Tony Stark's corporate rivals and these other few that I just mentioned, here are my top 5 picks for the Mephisto clients that he referenced in this episode. I think a key detail that we need to be looking at is characters who have mysteriously powered tools, some kind of interesting technology that aided in their advancement. Number 1, Wenwu. I singled out the former leader of the Ten Rings in my reaction video, but the way the Dweller in Darkness presented himself as a mysterious voice from another realm, offering to give Wenwu his deepest desires, and the fact that we were never shown where the Ten Rings came from and who they were summoning. It's possible that this historic rise came from a deal with Mephisto. Number 2, Val. As a director of the CIA and now the manager of the New Avengers, Val is exactly the kind of candidate with a mysterious past in Italy, with a father who was killed by organized crime. She's just the kind of person who would have signed this kind of deal. Her special tool, I think, was just this randomly successful serum to make Sentry from the Ox Group. Next, Wilson Fisk. As the mayor of New York City, he's also the kind of tortured soul who miraculously survived what should have been a deadly wound off screen, and he has some kind of AI-powered technology that he used to communicate with Maya Lopez. If Mephisto stays a Marvel television character, I think the Marvel television world might get more integrated, and that includes stories like Ironheart with stories like Daredevil Born Again. Next, Killmonger. I bring up Killmonger as someone Ryan Coogler I think might consider as a past Mephisto candidate. We know Killmonger's humble beginnings in Oakland, California, but as an adult, he just suddenly reappeared on the map with an impressive kill record and the kind of focus that Parker Robbins had in Ironheart. Also, a pattern of skin scarring. The fact that Killmonger's ghost haunted Shuri in the ancestral plane in Black Panther Wakanda Forever suggested to me that his soul is being held back in some kind of dark way. And again, the rule is not that Mephisto gave these people their talents, it's that he recognized their talents and their desperation and supplied them with resources to get ahead. And our final candidate, Thanos. We cannot forget that Mephisto was originally a cosmic villain in Silver Surfer comics who stood at Thanos' side in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. Thanos' origins were an ostracized pariah of his society on Titan who was ignored, but Thanos rallied. He came back, he forged the Infinity Gauntlet on Nidavellir with Eitri, but was he sent on that stone quest and helped in that process, equipped with the idea to forge this gauntlet as part of a deal with some kind of demon? Obviously, Mephisto saying he's been busy with the other clients is probably a setup for the arrival of Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, maybe also the Midnight Suns, but I think one of the 5 people I just mentioned, or at least one of the 2 that are still alive, Val or Fisk, have shaken the wrong hand. Get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use promo code ROCKSTARS at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use code ROCKSTARS. Thank you, Delete Me, for sponsoring this video. Comment down below with your thoughts, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Rick Denmon, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at Erik Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.